How's it going, everybody? This is going to be my review of the M&P40 by Smith & Wesson. This is my first YouTube review, so hopefully I don't make it too boring and you get some useful information. I don't go on any kind of a rant. So let's jump right into it. So first, tell you a little bit about myself. Not really much of I'm not strictly a range shooter. I actually do a job that requires me at times to act in a law enforcement capacity. Though I'm not law enforcement, I'm not to be confused with law enforcement officers. Those guys, encounter a lot more danger and get into situations that they're not expecting on a regular basis. And so that's a lot more dangerous than what I do. Typically, I do have to recover fugitives and such, but I do have the luxury of picking my time and place and when to do it and trying to make it as safe as possible for me and my team and the defendant. So with that said, I'm reviewing this pistol. This is my duty pistol, and I'm reviewing it in that capacity. And so I'll jump right into it. One thing about the M&P40 is it's very, very ergonomic. Most of the M&P40s are. I came into this gun used. I got a real good deal on it. The previous owner loved it, but unfortunately it was strapped for cash, so I went ahead and purchased it at a deal. It was my first experience with an M&P. I'd never shot one, never even held one before. Background's kind of a 1911 guy coming into Glocks and the new polymer pistols, from Berettas to Browning high powers. I mean, I've owned a few pistols out there. And of course, 1911 was always one of my favorites, as probably most of you guys. And when I found the M&P, I was very surprised after shooting and owning a number of Glocks, how ergonomic it was. That was probably my biggest impression. And it's, wow, is this thing actually reliable like that? And is it maybe Glock reliable? Which is hard to approach by most manufacturers, especially with their track record. So, but I did find it to be extremely ergonomic. So as I started to use it, started to train with it and possibly make it my duty pistol. And so, especially in the line of the work I'm in, I was in it, I happen to own it. So it comes with a 15+1 magazine in the 40 caliber. Pretty nice, pretty decent magazines. I do like them a good bit. You can take them apart and everything. It's pretty nice. One thing about these magazines, this is the newer generation Smith & Wesson 40 magazines, also chamber 357 SIG, which I don't have a lot of experience in with the 357 SIG. This is the earlier magazine for the M&P40, and you notice there's a little bit of a difference between the two. Let's see if I can get it to where you guys can see this. There's a round hole here versus a square. Both of them pretty good. I've taken both of these apart after a mud and torture test of this firearm, and I had to literally get about a good inch of mud off the bottom of the follower. So I'll come back to these magazines about a few things about the differences that I've found between those two. But a few other features that it has: there's no safety, external safety. It doesn't come with one. Typically, I believe these firearms come with 3 magazines. I bought it used. It had 2. Had the previous magazine and a newer one. I guess he might have only bought it with 1 mag and then bought an extra one, and then I even bought another one of the newer style magazine. But there is a loaded chamber indicator on it, which is pretty nice. It has the option for an external safety. If you can see right here, there is a little lever, and it just kind of shows you how to put it in. You can install it yourself. It's not too difficult from what I understand. I'm not a big fan of it. I believe that, regardless of how many safeties you have to use the ultimate safety, which is your finger out of the trigger guard until you're on target. So being that that is the ultimate safety anyhow, and you don't ever trust the safety, because you must trust this one. This is the one I just go for, and wouldn't like to have a lot of other added stress on it, because like I say, this is a duty pistol for me, and stress does happen, and you don't want extra things to actually have to do if God forbid you ever had to use this again in self-defense. So with that, I'll go on to the trigger. The trigger on this firearm, there's a lot of controversy over this trigger, probably more than I've ever seen on any other firearm, modern firearm that is popular out there. One thing a lot of people don't like about it is they claim it's real mushy. I guess you could call it mushy, but I think more they're feeling this lever here. This lever is your safety lever that is similar to the Glock. You can't get it to actuate. You see here, by the way, all these firearms have been checked and cleared. I might bring in a couple of others, but I'll go ahead and strike it out for you. And you know, they could be feeling that. Not really sure. I don't find it very mushy. I guess you could call that mushy and gritty. And of course, you're going to come up against a wall and then it breaks. And you also do not get a very tactile reset. If you notice here, there the firearm resets right there. It was kind of hard to tell where it resets because you can't really hear it. Sometimes you can kind of hear it, sometimes you can't. The gritty, if you hear that, yeah, it's a little bit of a gritty feel to it. This lever safety, I think, like I said, it could be responsible for some of the mushiness people claim. Here's a Glock 27. It's been safety checked. You can see here this little lever there. That's going to be the safety on a Glock, your Glock style safety. And they just went a little bit different with a flat face trigger, but also had the similar lever that if it's not actuated all the way here at the bottom as well, it's not going to go off. Probably maybe not as safe, but ultimately safeties are going by the wayside, and there's a reason, and probably we can thank Glock for paving the way of ridiculous safeties on firearms that aren't needed. Now, one thing that people like and dislike about firearms is the capability of a magazine disconnect safety. And if you're not familiar with it, just real quick, if you drop the magazine, of course the gun will fire. I don't like to drop it on a polymer follower. If you dry fire the firearm, it'll fire. If you go ahead and do that without a magazine, gun still fires. Now, some of them make it to where they don't fire. That's a double-edged sword, in my opinion. Somebody could say, well, if you get in a wrestling match for your firearm, you can drop the magazine and it won't fire and you won't get shot by your own gun. A lot of people, and as you may know, law enforcement is kind of a problem. A lot of times when they get shot, it's by their own firearm, which is horrible. But on the other hand, it's a double-edged sword. If you were to accidentally drop your magazine, which actually with this model I think would be a little bit difficult, and I'll explain why in a second. Accidentally drop your magazine, you don't even have one round to send down range while you're picking your magazine up off the ground. I'm not a big fan of that. I know a lot of people aren't. I really just don't want that. I want the gun to be able to fire. What if you would accidentally not get it in all the way, chamber the round? You got a round in there. It's probably not going to feed the next one, but you don't even have one round now. You just get nothing on your trigger. I don't particularly like that, so I don't subscribe. That's kind of a must for any firearm that I have, that it does not have a magazine disconnect safety. Now, with something like, say, your concealed carry piece, something, you know, something of this size, maybe it's in 380, something else, you're pretty much going to be using it as a belly gun. This is a car CW40, but maybe you have something else like a 380, something like that, where you're probably going to be in close proximity with a firearm like that. I like to call it a belly gun because that's where you're going to be putting it to use. Maybe you do want to have a magazine disconnect safety. Not something that appeals to me, so I don't do it. And it actually even has a warning here: caution, capable of firing with magazine removed. I didn't feel that was necessary. I think they've done a couple of things overkill over the years. This is one of the first models to come out for M&P. It has a little bit different sights now. If you go and purchase one, they've actually removed a little bit of this, made it a little flatter here on this ramp on the sight. And the reason they did that is you can't really rack this off a belt. So some people complained about that as far as if one of your arms or something like that, was unusable and you needed to operate and manipulate this weapon one-handed. So, which is a concern I can totally understand. Me personally, if I really need to rack the slide, I'm going to step on the slide with my shoe, my boot, and get the slide racked. And a lot of people don't put that out there that is a viable option to do. But hey, maybe you're in some really tall brush, sand, mud. You don't want to get all that in your pistol. So definitely that's something to look at. Being able to rack the slide off a belt or something like that where you're not having to worry about getting so much crud in your weapon. Although I have racked this in the dirt, in the grass, and didn't get any problems by using my foot. But like I said, not the preferred method, but it's something you could go to. Now, the next thing I want to talk about as far as the trigger, a lot of guys, it bothers them so much. Maybe they're a range shooter. If you're a range shooter and that's all you really do is take it to the range, I could see maybe putting an Apex trigger in. Some people put that. It's a little lighter trigger. Maybe you could change the springs to make it a heavier combat trigger. But the new model M&Ps, they're actually made it with a tactile reset. So instead of you firing and then after the reset, you're actually going to get a click right there instead of what I just got, which was almost nothing. So they have improved that a little bit. Some people say, well, still a little bit gritty. Probably kind of the way they make the trigger. I haven't noticed any issues with it whatsoever. I've never short stroked this in firing. Some people say that the M&P, they made it this way because it is made for M&P, military and police, in order to not have an officer anticipating where the reset is to go ahead and get a full let off before they squeeze off another round. I can kind of see the logic in that, but it really bugs some people. Like I said, never had an issue, never short stroked this trigger to where it wouldn't fire, especially in a rapid fire, high added stress environment. the trigger's kind of getting yanked there. There's no issue of not resetting the trigger, so not for me anyway. Now the other features that are on the new ones that are notable on the newer generation of them, I don't know of any other than they've changed the trigger. They've slightly changed that. I don't really know of any other real differences except for the coating. Now this particular coating here, I don't know if you can see it, and this is very well used, as you can see. I've got over 1,000 rounds in it, and I'm not sure how many rounds had it in it before. It's probably somewhere approaching 2,000 rounds, and running like a champ. But if you notice, I don't know if you can really see in the camera there, there's some rust under this finish, which is a melanite finish, and it's stainless steel over melanite, and there shouldn't be rust under melanite. It really just shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't happen to stainless steel at all. Well, guess what? I got it. It ain't coming out. The rust that's underneath is actually underneath the melanite finish, and the rust is being protected to where I can't get to it. I mean, it's in the slide serrations. It's all over on this one. Now, this gun's extremely accurate. My sights are dead on. I don't need to factory messing with it. It does come with a lifetime warranty from what I understand, and I could probably go ahead and have that kind of taken care of. It's just not a big deal to me. I'm not the type that worries about a dent or a ding or a scuff on my firearm. As a matter of fact, if it's owned by me, it's going to get many, many of those just in testing alone before I consider it even a duty pistol. Not that it's got to have scars. It's got to go through its paces, and I need to train with it and be comfortable with it before I'm willing to stake my life on it. And I've staked my life on this pistol many times. So as you can see, I'm kind of a fan. Now, I'm a fan of all M&Ps? No, I'm not. As a matter of fact, I believe that Glock makes a couple of models that compete with this that are better. just because of size, weight, magazine capacity. This firearm's often compared to the Glock 22, which is a 15+1 as well, just like these. And it's about maybe an ounce lighter, an ounce and a half, something like that. It's ridiculous. How real similar size, similar capacity, everything else. But as anybody knows, Glock is not known for great ergonomics. As a matter of fact, a lot of people compare it to holding a 2x4. So this, when you put this firearm in your hands and then you grab a Glock 22 of the same variety, 40 caliber, and you start to really get into the differences in the two, you're gonna admit this feels better. Period. Now you still get Glock reliability, Glock performance, but you know what? If this was going to be just as reliable and perform just as well, if not better, in my opinion, just because of the trigger, and yes, this trigger is better than a Glock trigger, unless you're considering tactile reset and whatnot. If those are huge issues for you, maybe not. But the execution of this trigger, not wanting to duck rounds left all the time, which is real common for Glocks with most shooters, you're really going to like this M&P, and you're going to like it a lot better. Like I said, I mean, as far as target, I have a few targets here. And this is some that I shot, way back as far as accuracy. This is at 5 yards, 5 shots, 180 grain Winchester white box. This firearm really likes 180 grain. I have to say that. It really does like 180 grain. 165 grain, you don't notice much of a difference. However, I do notice maybe a little more consistent grouping with 180 grain. The firearm really likes to chew that up. And I mean, you can see the group there. That's at 5 yards. Not much arguing there. That's 5 shots. Here's another one here. This is 5 shots at 15 yards. And you can see, 2 right on, 1 a little low, and left or right over there, but you're not seeing really any tendencies. That was, believe me, shooter error I knew when I shot it. 5 shots, 15 yards, 180 grain white box. This is really good grouping, guys, as far as the pistol's concerned. I've never had a firearm actually that shot it consistent. Now I've come into some other firearms, but something like this in a full-size duty pistol, it's amazing. Now, would I recommend the M&P over the Glock 21? No, I wouldn't. 13-round capacity versus 15-round capacity. Whatever it has, maybe 13-round capacity versus 10-round capacity in the M&P for the same size gun. Don't like it. I've also heard of some reliability issues with that. Sometimes a design is really suited for a caliber, and we've seen that in the past with PPKs and other stuff like that, and just different firearms that when you transition into another caliber, just doesn't work as well. So, and really, you kind of find that in Glocks as well. I mean, you look at their 380 competition for the model that they newly released in the United States. It's just not as, it's just not as good as some of the other stuff that's out there. The Rugers and just other little pocket pistols that have just really done a better job. So, although the Glock design is probably one of the most reliable designs across different calibers, it's real hard to beat this firearm in terms of performance, ergonomics, reliability, trigger, accuracy, combat recoil. It's about an ounce and a half heavier than the 22, and it's pretty much all up here, and which helps you recoil, yet the gun remains a very balanced weapon. I mean, when you have a fully loaded magazine in here, there's no real top heaviness to it. Some could claim that there is, but really it's not. Very natural pointing as well. Another thing about it, I have some video shooting as far as accuracy and stuff. If you just watch the video, me just doing some target shooting. Also have some rapid fire and reload. Let's see, I didn't get too good of an angle on the paper last time. Let's see if we can keep it framed up. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Really? About 22
which is pretty
out of 30.
good about that. You have a slightly beveled magazine well, which is nice. Of course, you can see in there, if you can see, it's this one's used. You know, there's a little bit of chewing in there. At some point, I might have the old gunsmith mill some of that out, maybe coat it in there to give me a little more positive magazine release. I notice over time, after a while, it starts to get a little sticky, especially in the rain and grit and stuff, or somehow if I put too much gun oil or something like that and it gets on the mag, it doesn't want to come out as freely as something else, say like the PPQ. Really, really good. Look at this magazine release. There's a big difference between something like that and something like this. This magazine release, and this is one of my gripes about the weapon, is not superly large, but it is available. It's not as bad as some of the Glock models have been, and it's a little stiff. You know, you can get it, but man, you've got to really twist your hand in here to get it done. Now, this does have available back straps, 3 different back straps. This is the medium. It also comes in a small and a large for your hand. So that's another good aspect about this, which now the Gen 4s have. But this is a little wider area. The back strap actually comes all the way around here. And there's a little tool that you can take out and this and that. It does a couple of things. You untwist this, pull it out, and you can get the back strap off. There's a lot of reviews, though, and tabletop reviews of this firearm, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of that. A lot of real good ones. I'd just be beating a dead horse on that. If you really want to go into that, and as far as the takedown and stuff, you can. I'll just briefly take it down, only because it's really quick on this particular firearm. You lock it back. Of course, you got a clean, safe gun. Go ahead and rock that in. Pull it down, strike it out, just like a Glock, comes right off, only you have a takedown lever. Some people prefer it to trying to pull those little bitty tabs on a Glock. And of course, you pull it out here, you've got your recoil spring, your barrel, and you know, it does have the locking lug and whatnot. Pretty nice. Another notable thing about it, difference between this and a Glock, is the steel recoil spring that it comes with. Rather than the polymer. A lot of people don't like the polymer being there, especially that close to the barrel. There's going to be heat, other stuff, stresses on the firearm, and over time, polymer breaking, melting, anything happening to it, or just getting chewed up. So it already comes with a steel on here, which is pretty nice. And to reassemble, you just, of course, put all that back on. And typically, when you do that, this normally, there we go, goes back to you. This has a good amount of wear on it, but normally that would just slide right on back. Now, talking about that as far as wear and stuff like that, and a small difference in these magazines is the fact that there was 2 different ones now. This is the newer generation of magazine, which I had one of these, and I actually had the older generation. I wasn't even sure if this was actually a magazine for this gun, but it is. It's a Smith & Wesson 40 and 357 SIG as well. You can use this for. Mine's chambered in 40, of course. And but I did notice one thing, and I believe it's usually this mag that causes it. And this is a common problem with some of these firearms, including Glock. This go under my weapons manipulation. If you're locked back on your last round and really slam this home with some rounds in it, it can go ahead and chamber on its own. Now, that's typical of a lot of models, believe it or not, out there. And this has done it to me, and it's done it to me more than once. I don't actually mind it, because guess what the next thing I'm going to do as soon as I do slam my mag home? I'm going to chamber the round. So if it did it for me, I just saved seconds. And the good thing about it is it's doing it reliably. If it wasn't doing it reliably and possibly misfeeding or making it to where it wouldn't extract after that first round, that would be an absolute issue. It really bothers some people when that slide comes forward after slamming it home. Doesn't bother me in the slightest. Really doesn't. I can't think of too many applications where it would be a problem. The gun's not going to go off. You still should be using user safety, finger out of the trigger guard while you're reloading.
finger shouldn't be in the trigger guard at all. So long as you're using proper gun safety techniques and proper technique in any fashion, for that matter, when reloading your firearm, you shouldn't have any issues whatsoever whether the slide goes forward or not. So main thing is, did the round get properly chambered? And so far for me, it has. Like I said, well over 1,000 rounds, maybe 1,500, 1,800, really wasn't counting. This firearm probably has somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 rounds through it, and I've never experienced one malfunction in many. And now, what I typically practice with, even when I first got it, for accuracy's sake, I went ahead and shot 180 grain. I typically shoot 165 grain. The reason I do that is most of the carry ammo that I'm able to find is 165 grain. So this is the ball round that you'd be shooting, for target. I usually use Winchester white box, and the reason that I use it, it's not anything against any other brand. I find them fairly reliable. They've been 100% reliable through my firearm. Accurate, and they're within $1 or $2 of the other cheaper brands. Now, of course, if anybody who shoots a lot knows, 40 calibers almost double the price of 9mm. So you're already spending a little more money, even though this is maybe $2 more than Tulio or some other ammo out there that's a little cheaper and probably a little crappier. I just go ahead and pay the extra $2 for a round of 50 to consistently shoot 165 grain, which most of my defensive rounds are. This is 165 grain Hornady Defense. This is my carry ammo that I shoot through it, and it shoots it pretty good. So that's why I practice with 165 grain. You can see there, critical defense. Pretty high rated round as far as ballistic tests, stuff like that, so I use it. I do mix bag my ammo for different scenarios and in different magazines. I also use 155 grain Hydroshock here. It's another one of my favorites to use. Hydroshock been around for a long time. Now this particular one here I don't actually use in my M&P, although I have run it and it does do it. This is a very light load by Barnes called the TAC XPD Defense Ammunition, and this is a very, very light, 140 grain. Now you don't notice too much of a difference going from 180 to 165, 155, but when you get to 140 in it and then go to 180 or something, you really notice it. And primarily what I have these rounds for is they're a decent defense round. It's not going to have a whole lot of punch. You see that big, huge hole. For weapons like this, a car. This is a 40 caliber car, CW40. It's pretty compact. You can get all fingers on it, but other than that, look how slim it is. Look at it compared to this. Come on, this is really concealable. So, because of that also, though, and it being such lightweight, it's a hand cannon. This sucker bucks. But with this, pretty manageable. So this is actually what I keep in here. But I figured I'd show you guys that. Now, I had brought out the Walther before, talking about weapons manipulation and actuating this. Actuating the slide release, you're going to want to slingshot this weapon. And I tell you, they make it real easy to slingshot it with these scalloped, or some people call them fish scale serrations. These serrations are really nice just because if you're a little downward pressure, a little upward pressure, doesn't really matter because of the waves of just the way it's designed. Very good, but they're not so sharp that they're going to cut you. I would like to see them go the full length up here to the taper. I like a little more. I like a lot of grip as much as I can get on a firearm. Some people really like serrations up here. There's actually shops that'll do you those style serrations up here in the front. Not a big deal for me. I don't press check too much, and with the chamber indicator, you don't need to. So, but it's adequate for me. I don't mind it at all. Now, I do prefer, however, the Walther PPQ serrations. These are just higher partly the way they design a slide. It's a little tapered and whatnot, but it's just, it's just more there, but it's not so sharp that it's really digging into you. So I just kind of prefer that. They also have them in the front, should you need them. So, I'm not opposed to having them in the front. That's fine. What an ugly pistol. I'm going to review this soon. But one thing you do notice actually about this PPQ, you see where that button is? Now I can reach over to it pretty easily with my hand. Now this is a 9mm. A little difference in caliber, of course. Same capacity, it's a little smaller weapon. So naturally, yeah, I can get to it. Don't really have to change my hand position. Now I still do when I shoot this gun just because I'm used to this one. But I like the way they did this. This here, you can't actually, you got to push the button, you got something blocking, but it's not blocking your thumb coming from this way, which is where most people are going to actually actuate the mag release safe. Can't say the same for this one. It has some plastic up at the same height as well to stop accidental actuation of the mag release. Now, it's a stinking stiff. I don't believe you're going to have a problem anyway, but that little hump there, I can't do it. I completely have to change my grip to get this mag out. One of my gripes about this weapon from my size hand. And I don't have very large hands at all. I wouldn't say they're real small. It's about medium-sized hands, medium to small, maybe toward the smaller end. I don't have big hands, and this is a full-size pistol, so it could be some of the issue. Might not be a big issue to some, but for me, that's what it is. Also, the mag release, or the slide release rather, is a little puny. It's a little puny. It's a little small. If I just push it down, and then, I mean, look at these little bitty serrations. That does nothing. It's nothing like this. I mean, look at that sucker. Look at those serrations there. I mean, that's giving you some grip and you got something to hit. I mean, you can pretty much do it, again, without changing your hand position. So, little disappointed on that there. Another thing, a lot of people go on about ambidextrous, and that's a big deal nowadays, and yes, it is. But I tell you, not as easy to get this down on this side. You know why? It's not hooked on this side. It's hooked on this side. This goes all the way around the frame to get to this side. So you really got to push this down with some force. And saying that you might be working this with your weak hand if you're a right-hander, these guns are still heavy toward right-handers, and probably most firearms will be. Now, there's a few out there that are different, but we'll cover that some other time. I'm going to be reviewing some other pistols. Speed, very fast. Your recoil management is pretty good on this firearm, partly because of the weight in the slide, and another part probably because of the ergonomics. It's so easy to get a hold of. When you put a Glock 22 in your hand and then you put this firearm in your hand, this feels smaller, but it's because of the ergonomics. So even though they're real close to the same size, same capacity, you're going to really notice a nice shooting experience with this firearm. Again, really good serrations on it. Everything else, I mean, you can get to. So as far as weapons manipulation, managing recoil, pretty good for all that stuff. Now, of course, you have the rail on here. I don't mount anything. I don't mount lights. I don't mount lasers. I use a hand light most of the time. But, I'm not opposed to putting a light on here, and maybe that could, help you with muzzle climb as well. But holster options, stuff like that, not real practical for me. Now, speaking of holsters, the way I like to go ahead and carry this firearm is with this, the good old Serpa. This is a Serpa number 13, and it will work with the M&P40. I believe it works with the M&P9. Now, that's what it says on the box. What does this actually work with? Well, let's see here. Works with this pretty good. Look at there. Yeah, little space there, but you can't get to the trigger. Easy to activate the button here and get it out. Sits nice and high. You can really get it. Happy with this holster as far as this is concerned, but what else will it fit in this holster? Let's see here. The old Glock. Oh, locks in perfectly. Nothing obstructing. Trigger guard's completely covered. Pretty neat. So I wonder what else it'll work with. PPQ.
a lot of people complaining that there's no holster out there that for the PPQ. And Blackhawk supposedly even claims they don't have one for the PPQ. Don't know when they're going to make one. Let's just... Oh, wow. Yeah, works there too. Expose the trigger guard. Slightly more than this one here. You can't get to that trigger. You can't get your pinky to that trigger. Plus, it's got the trigger safety. You definitely can't get around that part of it. So, yeah, this actually is an option for the PPQ. It works. Is it leaving a lot of barrel? Yeah, a lot of barrels left over in there. But you know what? I don't find that that's too big of a deal because this is the holster that was actually numbered for the M&P40. And look at there. You got good inch left over there. That kind of stuff doesn't bug me. It protects the end of my muzzle. And I like protecting the end of my muzzle. So that's not a big deal to me. It's a big deal to some, and that's fine. For magazine carry, yeah, I usually just use the paddles because a lot of times I'm not carrying duty. I'll carry concealed, something like that, where it's appropriate, but I don't with that. Now, I did put this through a torture test, and there are torture tests out there of this firearm and video that you can watch. I dropped this sucker in the full-on raining mud. I mean mud puddle, just got it caked all over, then picked it up, dropped it in there again. And what I found when I came up was mushy trigger, light primer strike, didn't fire. When I cleared that, it went ahead and it fired. It failed to eject, cleared that, and the firearm ran perfectly afterward. And when I say perfectly, I mean perfectly. Now I had to cycle that first one. However, if I'd have cycled that second one, the first one, and then while it was back, just kind of examined, I probably could have got the second one off and it wouldn't have misfed. But that's what it was. After that, ran the entire magazine and ran the rest of the day before I cleaned it. And it was a nightmare cleaning. I'm not going to do that again with this gun. I mean, oh, gosh, there's mud everywhere. Mud in the firing pin this thick. So, yeah, but it ran. It impressed me. If I dropped my gun in that kind of mud to that extreme, when we're talking deep south, black mud, this isn't, just dirt. I mean, it was mud and all up in it, just everywhere. I had to break down the magazines, everything. So, yeah, it was pretty bad. And the firearm ran just flawless after I was able to clear that first set of nasty. So overall, very impressed with the firearm. I am going to be doing a review of the PPQ. This firearm's testing is not complete before I do my review of it, but the reason I purchased this firearm is to possibly go down a 9mm, and this was the firearm that I chose that I thought made the best 9mm out there. Yeah, I know there's a Glock 19 out there. I shoot one all the time. My training partner has one. I shoot it quite frequently. I like it. Him and I are both going to be testing this against the 19 and my performance versus my duty pistol. So if I decide I am going to switch over to the 9mm for the slightly more manageable recoil and just the overall ergonomics of this gun. I mean, I said earlier, this is the most ergonomic gun that I've ever held at the point that I held it. I know there's a couple out there that are extremely ergonomic, but something like this, yeah, I tell you, in this caliber, in this size, I was just loving life. And it was the best till I picked up this. So this one's really super ergonomic, but that's a video for another day. So overall, if someone's considering purchasing an M&P, what would I recommend it for? Actually carrying one, using it for duty purposes, training with one on a very regular basis. I would say you can't go wrong with it at all. If I was going to put it up against a Glock model, I'm going to take this over the 22 over the 23 as a duty pistol. Now, if you're looking something to conceal and carry duty, maybe the 23 is right for you. 13+1. It's more along the size of the 19, and it's still 40 caliber. So I do have a few 40s. I try to keep 40s across For ammunition compatibility, you know, I don't always have to have it. I do like the 40 caliber, 9mm though, muzzle energy. I'm not going to get into all that, but as anyone knows out there, there's just not a lot of difference between 45, 9mm. There's some minor differences, and one day I'm actually going to put a video out on that, just explaining the differences in a very practical standpoint. Some things out there I think are not too practical. So that's my review of the Smith & Wesson. This one does have the factory night sights tritium that came factory that as an option. They have been working very well. They're still fairly bright, and I know this pistol is, you know, pretty old by now, so working out pretty good. But that's my review. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe if you care to.